Hello and welcome to MSUFCU's Financial Education Seminar Series. We're so glad you could join us this evening. These events are designed to give you practical tools and insights on a wide range of financial topics, things that truly matter in everyday life. Each seminar will be led by a member of our financial education team or by one of our trusted partners, helping connect you to resources both here at the credit union and out in the community. We've got an exciting lineup of sessions planned throughout the year, and you can check them out anytime at msufcu.org/events. Tonight's program is being recorded, and you can rewatch or share the event by going to our YouTube channel. Just search for MSUFCU and then select seminar series from those playlist options. After the presentation, we'll move into a short Q&A section where you guys can submit questions by using that Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and then we'll go ahead and answer those in the order that they were received. So I am Therese Bacon, financial educator here at MSU Federal Credit Union, and today we are going to present on money and relationships. So let's go ahead and dive right in. All right. So tonight we will talk about money and family, money and friends, money and partners, business partners, etc. And then just some general tips and how money kind of plays into all of that. So just a quick reminder, what I'm sharing here is suggestions, not personal financial advice. Everyone's situation is a little bit different. So my goal is to give you ideas, strategies to kind of make money talks feel a little bit less intimidating. So money can shape all kinds of relationships, family, friends, coworkers, even how we connect with a partner. It's one of those things that's always in the background, whether we notice it or not. The tricky part is that we all learn about money in different ways. So maybe your parents never talked to you about money, so you had to kind of figure it out all on your own. Or maybe you grew up in a house where every dollar was budgeted and tracked. So those early lessons kind of stick with us and they shape how we save, spend, or invest, later on. So when two people come together, say roommates splitting rent or a couple trying to decide on a vacation, you've got two sets of money values colliding, and that can cause friction, right? So one person might think, hey, we should save every extra dollar. And the other person is saying, hey, let's enjoy life while we can. Neither one is wrong, but without talking it out, it can definitely lead to some arguments. In fact, research does back this up. So 55% of Americans say money is a major source of conflict at home. And the same survey found that in 2022, financial stress hit the highest level it had been in nearly 10 years. So first, let's dive into family and money. So that can sometimes be a tough mix, right? Relationships with the people closest to us can get complicated when money enters the picture. So one thing to remember is to stay realistic about what you can afford. For example, so maybe the family wants to go on a big vacation, but your budget is telling you that it's only going to stretch for maybe a weekend road trip somewhere. So it's better to be upfront about that than to stretch yourself too thin and maybe feel resentful later about those choices. It also helps to start talking about money with your kids from an early age in ways that they can actually understand. So when my kids were little, I'd give them a couple of dollars at the grocery store and let them pick out something for themselves. So it kind of taught them that choices do have limits. And sometimes, they couldn't get a piece of candy and the small toy they wanted. They had to kind of prioritize and maybe put their, needs in front of their wants. And as they grow, you can give them more responsibility. So, for example, maybe covering half the cost of their first car, but then they're going to have to cover, the other half or gas and insurance, et cetera. So having those conversations early is really going to set those clear expectations and maybe avoid some fights or conflict later on. So the big theme here is clarity. So being honest about what you can and can't do financially and gradually giving kids real experiences with money so they can learn a little bit on their own. Sometimes family members struggle financially and we naturally want to help them, right? We've all kind of been there, I'm sure. But support doesn't always have to mean handing over your cash to them. It could mean babysitting for them so they could work extra hours if they need childcare, helping them meal plan so that they can save money at the grocery store when they go for their weekly shopping trip, or connecting them with financial education resources like this that can help in the long term. So one example from my own life, my 23-year-old daughter recently couldn't afford new tires for her car. So instead of just giving her the money, I helped her research, discounts at different local shops, drove her around to a couple places. We found one that actually offered some financing options at 0%. So she was able to actually, you know, purchase the tires on her own, get that paid off. It's actually going to help, improve her credit even. So that's good. So it was that support that really solved the problem and also gave her those tools that she can put to use next time. Another important piece is actually talking with family about money. So these conversations don't have to be heavy or stressful. They can be about values and goals and maybe your own habits. So, maybe you have two kids and, when they get their birthday money or gift cards or something like that, they want to spend it right away. And the other one wants to save it or really, think about what they really want before they make that purchase, right? So you kind of have two, we're all kind of different in families, but really talking through those different approaches with everyone can help everyone understand kind of where that other person is coming from. And then once you know each other's values, it's easier to make family decisions together, like planning a trip or helping with caring for an aging parent, right? Or figuring out how much everyone can pitch in for holiday gifts before the holiday season comes. So the key is keeping it comfortable and open so no one feels judged in the long run. All right, so mixing family and business is a little bit more common than people think. So, about 75% of entrepreneurs and over 80% of established business owners work with family in some sort of way. So, here's the kicker: less than 1 in 5 of those businesses actually have a conflict resolution plan. So, that's a lot of family businesses just kind of winging it if a disagreement does happen to come up. And if you've ever worked with family, it can get tricky, right? So one day you're talking about payroll, the next day you're sitting across from each other at Thanksgiving dinner. So without those clear boundaries, business stress can kind of spill over into family life pretty quickly. Another tip is to notice how business stress affects moods at home. So if a sibling or a spouse is having a rough week with the business, it can kind of color their reactions with family also. Just being aware of that can kind of help to prevent some of that unnecessary conflict. So, bottom line here, if you're in business with family, take the time to create that clear conflict resolution process and set some boundaries between, business hours and family hours. It can really save a relationship in the long run. And then talking with money about money with friends can also feel a little bit awkward at first, but it can actually strengthen your friendship and help everyone involved with their financial journey. Sometimes a simple conversation can lead to new ideas or even just reassurance that you're not the only one going through this, right? Trying to figure these things out. The key is really setting the right environment. So these talks usually go better over coffee or on a walk or, in a setting where you both feel a little more comfortable. Definitely not in some loud bar or restaurant where you're kind of shouting over the music or there's other people nearby that might overhear your conversation. A good way to ease into this is with kind of general questions. So, for example, instead of diving right into, so how much debt do you have? Which might scare somebody off initially, you could ask, have you ever used one of those budgeting apps? Or what's your go to saving tip? It kind of keeps things a little more light and kind of opens that door for them to respond. And just pay attention to their body language. So if they look uncomfortable or kind of giving you shorter answers, that's kind of your cue to change the subject at that point. But sometimes friends will surprise you and open right up, knowing that you're going through the same types of things that they're going through. So remember that these conversations don't have to be all serious. You kind of want to laugh about your financial missteps that you may have taken in the past. One of my friends and I once swapped stories about impulse buys that we regretted. And let's just say I'll never live down my little bread making phase when I bought a $200 bread maker and probably only used it about once before I sold it on Facebook Marketplace. But sharing those moments kind of makes money feel a little less intimidating. And finally, don't be afraid to share your financial dreams. So saying out loud, I'd love to save for a trip to Europe, or I'm trying to pay off my student loans before reaching, age 40. That can really lead to your friends suggesting strategies or even joining you in that goal. So it kind of makes money part of your support system instead of this taboo topic that you always want to shy away from. All right. So loaning money to friends or family is one of those things that sounds kind of simple, right? But it can get really complicated fast. A Bankrate survey found that 60% of Americans have loaned money to someone close to them. But here's the downside: 37% said they lost money doing it, and 21% of that group said it actually damaged the relationship. So that's why it's so important to set boundaries before you even get asked. Know ahead of time what you'd be comfortable loaning and be ready with a response. For example, you might say, I can't afford to help right now, but is there another way I can support you through this time? And sometimes just being prepared, for that question and that response is going to make that conversation go a lot easier. And if you do decide to loan money, make sure you outline your expectations about the situation clearly and at the beginning, right? Agreeing on a payment schedule can kind of prevent those awkward misunderstandings that may come about, um, you know, or or if the money is even going to come back at all. I've seen situations where someone thought it was a gift, the person receiving the money thought this was a gift and the other person was waiting for repayment. So that's definitely a recipe for tension in that relationship. And here's the golden rule: only loan what you can afford to live without. So, honestly, in some cases, it's better to think of it as a gift. So, if it doesn't come back, you're not going to hold on to that resentment. But most importantly, never put yourself in a spot where helping somebody else is going to keep you from paying your own bills or reaching your own financial goals that you've set for yourself. Supporting others is generous, but not if it's going to leave you struggling as well. All right, so money and partners. So talking about money with your partner can sometimes feel uncomfortable at first, but it is really one of the most important conversations that you'll ever have. These talks don't have to happen all at once. They can kind of grow over time as your relationship grows, right? So in the beginning, we'll start on that left side. You kind of want to keep it simple, asking those lighter questions like, how much do you think it's important to keep in our emergency fund? Or what's your biggest financial fear? So these are good icebreaker questions that can kind of open that door without it feeling too heavy. And as things get more serious, you'll want to go a little deeper. So that might mean asking about student loans, right? That's always a big debt that a lot of people are carrying these days. Credit card balances, or even maybe pulling your credit report together and kind of going over that. So, one couple that I know of kind of made it like a money date night. So they ordered takeout, they sat down with their laptops, and they both pulled up their credit scores and kind of talked about what was on there. So it turns something more stressful into kind of like teamwork, team building activity in that relationship. And eventually, you'll want to get really clear about the big picture. So questions like, what's our total debt? What investments do we have together? What happens after we reach our current financial goals? Where do we go from there? So those conversations are going to help make sure that you're on the same page before taking big steps, like buying a house or combining finances together, or eventually planning for retirement, right? And remember that these talks aren't about judgment, they're about understanding each other's habits and experiences and hopefully their dreams with money so that you can move forward as a team. These money conversations look a little different before and after marriage. So we just kind of wanted to touch on this a little bit as well. So before marriage, really it's all about transparency. So you want to know what you're getting into together. So that means laying everything out on the table: student loans, credit card balances, like we talked about, auto loans, maybe even old medical bills that you weren't able to pay at some point. So basically, if it's a debt, it should be part of that conversation. You'll also want to share credit reports, like I talked about. Talk about how you're handling your amount of debt right now. If one person is just making minimum payments and the other is aggressively trying to pay down their debt, then that's a little bit of a mismatched, value that you'll kind of want to address in that partnership. And this is also a time to dream a little. So talk about your future. If you want to have children, when you want to retire, really what your complete vision is for your future. What does retirement look like to you? Do you want to be able to be snowbirds and go to Florida in the winter? Do you want to just travel the world? Or do you want to stay at home close to your family? So really talking about that early on is going to help you plan together and have those common goals. And then after marriage, the focus kind of shifts here. So now it's about teamwork. One red flag is letting only one partner handle all the money. And I do see this happen a lot, even nowadays. So not only does that create that power imbalance, but if something does happen to the partner that is controlling all of the money, then the other might be left completely in the dark on how they need to handle this. So ask yourselves, do we have a team mentality with money, or are we each just kind of doing our own thing? A good strategy is to set aside a little bit of fun money for each of you every month. So something that you can spend with no questions asked. So that way, no one feels like they have to justify, every Starbucks stop on the way to work, or video game purchases, or streaming, something like that. So yeah, setting aside that little bit of fun money can be a good way to kind of still feel like you have your own financial freedom in that situation. And finally, any financial plan that you create together should pass three tests. So you want to ask, is this good for my mental health? Is it good for our budget? And does this hold true to our values? So as long as it checks all three of those boxes, you know that you're on the right track. This next section is a little heavier, but it's important to talk about. Money, it's not just about budgets and bills. It can also be used as a tool for control, unfortunately. And financial abuse happens when one person tries to limit or control another's access to money. It might look like a partner taking your paycheck and only giving you an allowance out of it, or hiding certain accounts from you, refusing to let you be part of any of the financial decisions. So sadly, this often shows up in families and in those interpersonal relationships, and can sometimes be a part of a larger pattern of abuse here. And the statistics are pretty striking. Financial abuse costs the U.S. economy over 15 billion every year. It's actually the most common form of elder abuse. So think about that. Older adults being taken advantage of by the people that they trust the most, right? Then there's financial infidelity that we want to touch on. So this isn't always as obvious, but can still be really damaging to a relationship. And that's when couples who share money lie to each other about their finances, like secretly opening a line of credit that the other doesn't know about, hiding purchases or keeping certain debts a secret. I even heard of somebody tell me about a situation they knew where one of the spouses was hiding Amazon packages, at a neighbor's house so that their partner wouldn't notice that extra spending that they were doing, right? So both of these issues come down to the same thing, trust and transparency. So whether it's abuse or just dishonesty, when money is hidden or controlled unfairly, it really undermines the foundation of that relationship. And that's why that open, honest communication about finances is so critical in these relationships. So in that last slide, we talked about financial abuse, a little bit of financial infidelity, those bigger picture issues where money gets used as a tool for control or dishonesty. So let's zoom in a little bit more on that financial infidelity specifically, and kind of look at some of those warning signs that we might see. So these are the little red flags that might pop up in everyday life, sometimes so gradually, that you don't notice until it's really become a bigger problem. So one example of this, maybe your partner doesn't share household bills with you and kind of dodges your questions when you might be asking about certain things. Or you notice they're getting calls from collectors that you might not know about those accounts, and they're kind of dismissing your concerns about that. So they may not want to share their credit report, or they discourage you from joining financial planning meetings. So sometimes those signs, are even more concrete, like you might see bills arriving in the mail for accounts that you didn't know existed, or items showing up on your credit report that you never applied for, unfortunately. That can happen sometimes. All of these behaviors chip away at the financial trust in the relationship, right? So being aware of them gives you that chance to step in early, kind of have that conversation, with your partner before it gets a lot worse. All right, so we've talked about some of the challenges that can come up with money and partners, that financial abuse, financial infidelity. So let's shift gears and focus on the positive side. So, how couples can set themselves up for healthy, open conversations about money. So, this checklist that we're going to go through kind of gives a simple framework that you can use to keep money talks productive instead of stressful. All right, so step one, prepare to talk. So, don't bring up the conversation about money like in the middle of an argument, right? Which a lot of people tend to do when, the tempers are flaring, your emotions are high, you're feeling a little flooded, and then just things start to come out, right? Or maybe when you're, it's the end of the day and you're both exhausted from a long week at work, instead you want to pick a time when you can both be calm and focused on the subject. So, maybe over coffee on a weekend morning, or on, maybe you plan that money date night, like I talked about earlier. And then determine what to share. So it's definitely okay to ease into it depending on kind of where you are in the relationship. So maybe you don't dive straight into retirement planning, but you start with something smaller, like how you each feel about spending on vacations or going out to eat regularly. So over time, you can kind of layer in the bigger stuff like, what debt you're carrying or what your like long-term savings goals are, or, investments and retirement and things like that. Definitely be open and honest. So even if it feels uncomfortable, being upfront is going to prevent those problems, from surfacing later. So, if one of you has student loans or credit card debt, it's better to share that now than have it come up as a surprise down the road, maybe after the wedding or something like that. So think of honesty as kind of an investment in your trust in the relationship and your future together. And speaking of that, discuss those visions of the future. So, this is the fun part, right? Talk about what each of you want your financial future to look like. So, whether that's maybe owning a home someday, traveling, retiring early, hopefully. So, sometimes you'll find that you're aligned, and other times that you'll realize that maybe, you need to compromise a little to match up with where your partner is at. Then create a game plan. So once you've shared those goals, you want to work together on how to actually get to that endpoint. So that could mean setting a budget together, dividing bills in a way that feels more fair, or creating that joint savings account for a shared dream. That can be really helpful. And then finally, have, routine check-ins together. So don't let this be a one-time conversation. Even just a quick monthly meeting or quarterly meeting, that you guys put on the calendar and commit to is kind of going to help you stay on the same page and make adjustments when life might change over that month, right? So even 15 minutes over dinner to kind of look at goals and progress can make a big difference. So now that we've looked at some bigger picture conversations that you can have with your partner, let's get into some practical tips. So these are everyday strategies that can make money conversations a little smoother and a little less stressful. So first, let's talk about using the sandwich method. All right, so this is where you start with something positive, uh, share your concern, and then end with another positive, right? So we're sandwiching that concern around with positivity on both ends. So, for example, like you'll see here, I love spending time with you, and it's really important to me. But going to a fancy restaurant this weekend just isn't in my budget right now, right? So there's the concern. Could we grab a coffee and go for a walk instead so that we can still have that time together? Right. So you still want to spend time with them. You're ending it with another positive, right? So using that sandwich method can sometimes be a little bit softer and shows that you value this relationship while you're also kind of including setting that boundary in there. And then suggesting alternatives. So you don't have to say no and leave it at that. Maybe you swap dinner out for a cozy movie night at home or a game night with snacks. So the point is to still connect without blowing the whole budget out. And then discuss budget and plan ahead of time. So a lot of awkwardness can come from kind of those unspoken expectations that we might have. So for instance, do you and your friend, maybe you have a friend that you meet up with every now and again. When you're out for dinner, do you usually split the bill evenly or does everyone pay for what only for what they ordered. So talking about it up front can help avoid any surprises. Even something as simple as agreeing on a restaurant within budget before you go can kind of make that outing feel a little bit smoother. If somebody is on a tight budget and the other isn't, you might want to have that conversation. And then learning to say no politely, right? So sometimes, even with planning, you may need to decline every now and again, and that's okay. You can say no in a way that's respectful of your relationship. Like, I'd love to join, but it's just not in my budget right now. So people who care about you are going to respect you for that, setting that boundary and, conveying that to them. So, as we've seen here, money weaves its way into nearly every relationship that we have, whether that's with family, friends, or partners. And while it can definitely create challenges, it also gives us opportunities to strengthen those connections when we approach it with honesty, planning, and a willingness to listen. So, as we wrap up today, I encourage you to think about one small step that you can take. Maybe it's starting a conversation you've been putting off, setting a boundary with someone, or planning ahead for an upcoming expense. So, those little changes can really make a big difference over time. So, I want to thank you all for spending your time with me today. If anyone does have any questions, definitely let me know. I'll be here for a few minutes. But I hope that you're walking away with some practical tips and maybe some fresh ideas for navigating money in your relationships. Once again, before you leave, you can scan this QR code to take our survey on tonight's session, get your feedback, or when you close out of the Zoom, it will also pop up on your screen. So go ahead and take a moment to fill that out. You can also scan the QR code on the right to see some additional ways that we can provide financial education and support you through our different avenues. And then for some upcoming seminar series events here, next week we will start October out with changes to Medicare for 2026. So if you're enrolling in Medicare for the first time, or if you have a loved one that maybe could benefit from this, remember that all of our financial education opportunities are open to the public here at Seminar Series. So we'd be happy to, have people join even if they're not MSUFCU members. And then on October 8th, we have Advocate for Your Wallet, right? So that will give us some different tips and tricks for really getting ahead, staying on track with our budgets, et cetera. So we hope that you will join us for that as well. And finally, we did talk about, talking with kids about money and some of these financial questions that they may have. So through the different stages of life, the Funtivity Zone can help children, starting as early as, 2, 3 years old with really cool activities, videos, interactive games, and things through our Funtivity Zone that can start their path of financial education from a young age. So if you do want to check out Funtivity Zone, feel free to scan that QR code, or you can just go to our website and use the search bar there to search for Funtivity Zone, and it will bring you right to that website. All right, so it looks like we don't have any questions. So I want to thank you all again for joining us this evening, and we hope to see you at another Seminar Series event soon. Have a good night, everyone.